The morning sun painted golden streaks across the quiet edge of Pine Ridge, a rural community just far enough from town to feel free but close enough for grocery runs. I had just finished brewing my coffee when I heard the knock. It was sharp, aggressive. Not the kind of knock neighbors use when they bring you zucchini, bread, or ask to borrow a wrench. I opened the door. There she stood. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses. Clipboard clutched like a weapon of justice. "Karen, good morning," she said, in the tone of someone who meant exactly the opposite. "Are you the new owner of Lot 17? "Yes, ma'am," I replied, confused but polite. "Just moved in 3 weeks ago." "Well," she sniffed, stepping forward like it was her porch. "Not mine. You may not be aware, but this land is under the governance of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, and we have rules. Rules about unauthorized farm structures." I blinked. Farm structures. She pointed beyond my shoulder, toward my field. That little shed near the trees. "That's an eyesore, and the well behind it. That's a code violation." I laughed softly, more out of disbelief than humor. "There's no well there. That's just a rain barrel and an old tool shed. The previous owner used it for garden tools." Karen's lips tightened. "We'll see about that." I closed the door slower than I wanted to. My hands trembled a little. I'd just finished escaping city noise for the peace of country life. I bought this patch of earth to start fresh, grow a few vegetables, maybe adopt a rescue dog. I never signed up for war with a clipboard warrior. 2 days later, a letter arrived. It was official. HOA Pine Ridge had filed a complaint against me for constructing an unpermitted groundwater extraction system. In other words, digging a well. A well that did not exist. I walked to the edge of the field that afternoon, staring at the so-called well. It was a dented plastic barrel, barely upright, filled with rainwater and mosquito larvae. The garden shed stood beside it, doors squeaking in the wind, rust clinging to its hinges like forgotten history. Nothing about this place screamed illegal. But that didn't stop Karen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the letter, but because of what the neighbor told me earlier that day. "Oh, you're in her sights now," the elderly woman next door said with a shake of her head. "She's taken down 7 families already. One guy left because his fence was 2 inches too tall." I raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding?" She leaned in. She tried to fine my daughter for having a pink flamingo in her yard. HOA bylaws don't even mention lawn decor. This wasn't just a grumpy neighbor. This was a woman on a mission. A self-appointed enforcer who had turned community spirit into a courtroom circus. I decided I would not be number 8. The next day, I called the HOA office. After being transferred twice and put on hold long enough to memorize the company jingle, I finally spoke to someone. "Yes, Mr. Adams," said the representative. "We received a formal complaint with photographs. It will go before the board next Thursday." "Photographs of what?" "A barrel." I asked. "The complainant believes you installed a well in violation of Section 3.7 of the HOA agreement." "I didn't install anything," I replied. "The shed and barrel were here when I bought the property. I have the inspection report to prove it." There was a pause. Then she spoke again, voice clipped. "You may present that at the hearing." It was clear. I had become a target. But what Karen didn't know is that I was not the average pushover. I had worked dispatch for over a decade in another city. I knew codes. I knew procedure. I knew that real violations involved proof, and I kept receipts for everything. Still, the stress was real. Each day, I saw her walking by, snapping more photos, sometimes standing just out of my property line with binoculars. I kid you not, binoculars. It went from annoying to disturbing fast. Then came the moment that turned everything. I had just walked out to water my tomatoes when I heard her voice behind me, yelling into a phone. Double quotes, "Yes, I'm calling to report. A property emergency. There's unauthorized water usage happening, probably illegal drilling. Yes, I need someone here immediately." She was screaming at 911. I froze. Not because I was scared, but because I knew that call was a serious offense. Misusing emergency services. That's not a petty HOA move. That's borderline criminal. So I pulled out my phone and did something Karen never expected. I dialed directly to the dispatcher's backline I used to work with. "This is Jacob Adams," I said calmly. "It's like to report a false emergency. Call being made in front of my property. The caller is screaming about a well that doesn't exist." Karen was still yelling into her phone when the dispatcher answered mine. And that was when things really started to heat up. Asterisk. Karen's voice echoed across the field like a fire alarm that refused to quit. "I am telling you, there is unauthorized water usage happening right now. This is an emergency." She paced back and forth near my fence, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. Her clipboard, now tucked under her arm, had pages flapping in the breeze like warning flags. But the real warning was the quiet voice coming from my phone. "Jacob. This is Sierra. I've got eyes on your location. Are you okay?" asked the dispatcher, her tone calm but alert. I had worked alongside her for years. We had handled real crises together: fires, car crashes, medical emergencies. She knew the difference between a disaster and a nosy neighbor with too much free time. "Yeah, Sierra. No emergency. Just HOA drama escalating into a misuse of 911. She's shouting about a non-existent well again," I said, watching Karen spin in a dramatic circle as if reenacting a crime scene for invisible detectives. "You want me to dispatch a deputy?" "Think it's time." Karen was still mid-rant when the sheriff's SUV rolled up, tires crunching softly on the gravel road. She did not notice him at first, not until he stepped out and said, loud enough for both of us to hear, "Ma'am, are you the one who called in a groundwater emergency?" Karen turned, all righteous fury and finger-pointing. "Yes, I called. There's an illegal well on this property, and I demand it be shut down. He's drawing water, which is a violation of HOA code and potentially," "Ma'am," the deputy interrupted, holding up a hand. "We've reviewed the satellite maps, the local permits, and spoken with dispatch. There is no record of a well on this property, legal or otherwise." Karen blinked. "But I saw it. The barrel. He's using it to tap the water table." The deputy walked over to the barrel, knocked on it with his knuckles, then lifted the lid and stared inside. "Rainwater," he said. "Dirty rainwater." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from a pond. "But this is unacceptable. I demand an official investigation." The deputy turned to me. "Sir, would you like to press charges for misuse of emergency services?" I shook my head, watching Karen's face go pale. "Not yet, but I want this on the record. I've got photos, timestamps, and the inspection report from when I bought the property. This whole mess started because she wants me out." He nodded, scribbled in his notepad, then gently directed Karen back toward her house. "Ma'am, I'm going to recommend you refrain from contacting emergency services unless there's a real threat to safety or property. A rain barrel doesn't qualify." Karen stormed off, muttering something about outsiders and destroying the community. But I could tell she had taken a hit, and she did not like bleeding in public. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, staring out at the peaceful landscape. The stars were brighter here than in the city. The crickets were louder too. I had come here for this calm, but Karen had turned it into a minefield. The next morning, a fresh letter appeared in my mailbox. This one was different. Karen was suing me. The complaint was filed in small claims. Court alleging damages to community value due to unsightly and potentially illegal water structures. Okay, the same barrel the sheriff had already cleared. I stared at the paper, dumbfounded. She's really doing it, I whispered. She's actually suing me over an imaginary well. I went straight to my neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, the sweet woman with the white curls who had lived in Pine Ridge for 40 years. She invited me in like family. "You're not the first," she said as I sat at her kitchen table. "But you might be the last. Karen's been using legal threats like Halloween candy. Most people just get scared and leave. Not me," I said. "She picked the wrong guy." Mrs. Ellis smiled. "Good. Then maybe it's time we all stopped being scared." "What do you mean?" She stood up and walked over to a dusty old filing cabinet. From it, she pulled a folder filled with documents, HOA newsletters, meeting notes, past complaints, and most interestingly, vote tallies. "She's been self-appointing herself on the board," she explained. "Never elected. Never voted in. She just started showing up with her clipboard. Took over after the last board president moved to Arizona." "You're kidding." She shook her head. "Karen is the HOA. No board, no checks. Just her." I looked at the papers and an idea began forming. What if we held a real vote? Mrs. Ellis grinned. "Oh, you're thinking like a community." It became clear to me then. Karen's power came not from the HOA, but from everyone's silence. She ruled by fear, not authority. But that grip was starting to slip. Later that night, I sat down and wrote my own letter. Not to the court, not to Karen, but to every neighbor in Pine Ridge. An invitation to meet, to talk, to vote. If Karen wanted a war over a fake well, I was going to give her something real to worry about her hold on the entire neighborhood. Within 24 hours of writing my letter, I had hand-delivered 37 neatly folded copies into every mailbox across Pine Ridge. No dramatic language, no accusations, just a calm invitation to a community meeting. It read, "Dear neighbor, as many of you may know, recent HOA actions have raised concerns. I invite you to join me this Saturday at 4 p.m. on my property for a casual neighborhood discussion about the future of our community and how we can better manage it together. Warm regards, Jacob Adams, Lot 17. I didn't know what to expect. Most folks kept to themselves. Some nodded politely when I passed by. Others looked away, perhaps afraid of drawing Karen's wrath. But when Saturday came, folding chairs and lawn blankets slowly appeared on my field. Mrs. Ellis was the first to arrive, carrying a basket of homemade peach muffins like a community diplomat. Then came the retirees from Lot 3, then the family from Lot 9, then 3 more. And 4 more after that. By 4:15 p.m., we had over 20 households present. Kids were running around. Dogs barked playfully. It looked more like a summer picnic than a rebellion. But beneath the smiles, I could feel the weight in the air, years of quiet frustration boiling under calm faces. I stepped onto the small wooden crate I used to store garden hoses. No microphone, no podium. Just me and my neighbors. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I'm new here. I moved for the peace, the space, and the people. But instead, I got sued for owning a rain barrel." Laughter broke out, nervous at first, then real. But what shocked me more than the lawsuit, I continued, was learning that there hasn't been a properly elected HOA board here in years. That's not just against policy, it's dangerous. Murmurs of agreement rippled across the crowd. "I propose we fix that. Let's hold a proper vote. Let's elect a board. Let's make Pine Ridge work for the people who live in it, not just one person's clipboard agenda." An older man with a baseball cap raised his hand. "You saying we can just vote her out?" Mrs. Ellis stood beside me and answered before I could. "According to the HOA charter, yes. If the community elects a new board with quorum, Karen's self-appointed role ends immediately. We've just never had someone brave enough to call a meeting. A woman in the back nodded. Count me in. I've had enough of her measuring my grass height with a ruler. Laughter again. It felt good. We passed around a sign-up sheet, one for nominations, one for volunteers. People who had been afraid to speak for years were now stepping forward, offering time, ideas, and even cookies for future meetings. But we all knew the calm wouldn't last long, because Karen showed up. She arrived at 5:02 p.m. in a cloud of gravel. Dust, her SUV screeching into the edge of my field like she was raiding a crime scene. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, and fury in her step. What is the meaning of this? She shouted, her voice slicing through the cheerful noise like a blade. This is unauthorized assembly. Several neighbors flinched. Others stood up. I stepped forward calmly. It's a community gathering on private property, Karen, I said. No rule against that. You can't hold an HOA meeting without official approval. She snapped. We're not holding an HOA meeting, I replied smoothly. We're organizing one, a real one, with ballots, with votes, with people. You have no authority to, neither do you, Mrs. Ellis interrupted, walking up beside me with the printed HOA charter in her hand. This says leadership must be elected every 2 years. Our last election was over 6 years ago. Karen's face twisted. This is mutiny. It's democracy, the man in the baseball cap shouted from behind us. Karen stood frozen, realizing her grip on the neighborhood was unraveling faster than she could scribble citations. Then, she did what I had feared most. She pulled out her phone and began filming. I'm documenting this illegal gathering for legal purposes, she said, swinging her camera from person to person. One of the teenagers laughed and did a peace sign. The crowd, no longer afraid, waved at the camera. Some even smiled. Karen realized her tactic had backfired. You're all going to regret this, she said through gritted teeth before storming back to her SUV and peeling off like a movie villain. In a bad sequel, after she left, silence fell for a moment. Then Mrs. Ellis said loudly, "Did anyone get that on video? We might need it." Laughter erupted again. I looked around at these people, strangers turned allies. A community beginning to remember its power. We had no board yet, no official vote, but we had something far stronger now, unity and Karen. She had just triggered the very thing she feared most, a neighborhood that was no longer afraid. The Monday after the meeting felt different in Pine Ridge. The air smelled fresher. The silence that once wrapped the neighborhood in fear now felt like calm before a necessary storm. Even the birds seemed louder, as if they, too, were ready. For change, I received 5 new knocks on my door that morning. But this time, it was not Karen, it was neighbors bringing muffins, questions, handshakes, and encouragement. The HOA sign-up sheets had grown from 2 clipboards into a Google Doc, with over 30 names and counting. People who once feared citations for lawn chairs were now offering to become block reps, vote counters, and newsletter designers. But of course, we all knew Karen would not go quietly. And she didn't. Single quotes. 2 days after the meeting, every household received a new HOA notice of violation. All hand-delivered. All with her signature. All with ridiculous claims. Lot 6 was cited for having unregistered exterior wind chimes. Lot 12 was fined $150 for publicly displaying political bias via mailbox stickers. Even Mrs. Ellis got slapped with a warning for hosting an unauthorized gathering of more than 6 persons. It was petty, it was laughable, it was pure Karen. But the difference now, no one was afraid to laugh. I saw neighbors exchanging the notices like trading cards. One even framed his as a badge of honor. Still, I knew we had to act fast. If we waited too long, Karen might file injunctions or twist bylaws in her favor. So I took it to the county office and filed the paperwork, a formal petition to hold a recognized HOA board election in accordance with Pine Ridge's own charter. The official said he had never seen someone do it before. Usually, folks just move, he chuckled. Not me, I said. We're done running. 3 days later, we had approval. A legal, county-backed neighborhood election was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Every household would receive a ballot. Every name on it would be chosen by majority nomination. Karen could even run if she dared. And yet, just when things seemed to be swinging our way, Karen played her most dangerous card yet. It was a Thursday. Quiet. I had just come back from picking up soil for my garden when I noticed something unusual. A truck parked near the back of my property. It was unmarked, but inside sat 2 men in hard hats and reflective vests. I approached calmly. Can I help you? One of the men looked at a clipboard. You're Jacob Adams. Yep, we got a work order for groundwater inspection. Someone filed a report about illegal well activity. We're here to assess environmental impact. My stomach sank. Who filed the report? I asked, already knowing the answer. Anonymous tip, the man shrugged, but official. Okay. I showed them the rain barrel. I showed them the shed. I even offered lemonade. The men were polite embarrassed. Even 10 minutes later, they confirmed what everyone else already knew. There's no well, one said. This is just a water catch barrel. It's legal. Harmless. Before they left, one of them gave me a look. This tipster. They filed reports like this before. Always vague. Always aggressive. We've started a list. And just like that, Karen's reputation reached beyond the neighborhood. But it was not just me she was targeting by that weekend. She began spreading flyers around town, accusing me and others of trying to dismantle the HOA, bring in criminal elements, and destroy community standards. She even had the nerve to call me a possible anarchist. I mean, really, an anarchist with tomato plants. Still, the damage she aimed for backfired. Because this time, instead of isolating people, Karen united them. People who had never spoken before were now chatting across fences, comparing stories. Shaking their heads, laughing together, Karen had overplayed her hand. And as the election day drew closer, the neighborhood turned from a frightened collection of homes into something she could know. Longer control. A community dot on the night before the vote. I walked the field one last time. The stars above Pine Ridge sparkled bright and silent, as if watching this strange little battle unfold, and I thought of how far we had come, from a fake lawsuit over a fake well to this moment. But I knew Karen would not let it end peacefully. There was one more move left on her board. One final outburst coming, and as I stood there under that wide country sky, I could already hear it building. The storm before the silence. Election day arrived with golden sunshine and a breeze that felt like change. Tables were set up near the community bulletin board, volunteers handing out ballots and refreshments. For the first time in a long while, Pine Ridge felt alive. Kids rode their bikes freely without being scolded about noise ordinances. Neighbors greeted each other by name. The tension that once wrapped the entire neighborhood like a fog had lifted, and Karen, well, she was suspiciously absent. No SUVs, no sunglasses, no clipboard. Just silence, too quiet. At 10:06 a.m., when over half the neighborhood had already voted, she arrived. Dressed head to toe in navy blue like a cartoon villain trying to look official, she marched straight to the table. Eyes wild, phone in one hand, papers in the other. This election is illegal, she announced loudly. It has not been approved by the Pine Ridge HOA leadership, which is me. Everyone went silent. A few people chuckled. Mrs. Ellis stepped forward. holding up the HOA charter. Actually, Karen, the county reviewed our petition and approved the election. We followed every rule you conveniently ignored for 6 years. Karen's lips twitched. I will not stand for this fraud. You people have no idea the legal storm coming your way. Go ahead, I said calmly from behind the booth. Because this entire election is documented, time-stamped, and co-signed by the county HOA oversight officer. You think that matters? Karen snapped. You think paperwork is going to stop me? Then, she did something even I did not see coming. She grabbed a handful of ballots and ripped them in half, right there at the voting table. Gasps rang out. One of the teenage volunteers stepped back in shock. Mrs. Ellis looked like she might faint, and I pulled out my phone. Thank you, I said, for committing election interference on camera. Karen froze. You're recording me? Every second. She lunged at me, actually lunged, but 2 of the volunteers stepped between us. I'm calling the sheriff. She screamed. Perfect, I said. Let him know it's Jacob Adams again. He'll remember me. And this time, he came even faster. Sheriff Daniels arrived within 15 minutes. Karen was pacing like a trapped tiger, fuming and huffing while half the neighborhood stood nearby, watching her fall apart. Miss Holloway, the sheriff said calmly, did you tamper with ballots today? Karen scoffed. They weren't real ballots. Are you denying that you destroyed them? They're invalid anyway. This whole thing is answered the question. Karen fell silent. Sheriff Daniels turned to me. Do you have video? I handed him my phone. Crystal clear. He nodded, watched a few seconds, then sighed. Miss Holloway, I'm placing you under citation for destruction of community voting materials and obstruction of a legal neighborhood election. You'll be required to appear in court. Karen's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I'm being generous by not arresting you, the sheriff replied. You've already been warned about misuse of emergency services. This just makes things worse. That broke her. She began shouting about conspiracies, lawsuits, illegal immigrants, and outside influences trying to ruin Pine Ridge. Nobody listened, nobody cared, and one by one, people turned their backs on her. Karen was escorted back to her car, flailing and sobbing. The woman who once ran the entire neighborhood with a clipboard and a glare was now being driven away like a child who had thrown one tantrum too many. The moment her car disappeared, someone started clapping, then another, and soon the entire crowd was applauding, not for me, not for Mrs. Ellis, not even for the sheriff, but for themselves, for standing up, for choosing each other over fear, for remembering that community was not control. It was kindness. That afternoon, the votes were counted. Out of 62 homes in Pine Ridge, 53 voted, and all 5 new board members were elected by an overwhelming majority. Mrs. Ellis was named HOA president. I became the secretary. We had a real team now, and a real future. Later that evening, Mrs. Ellis came by with a bottle of sparkling cider and a grin that could light up the whole county. You did it, Jacob. We did it, I corrected. She tried everything. Lawsuits, lies, even 911. But in the end, truth wins. She raised her glass to the non-existent well that saved the neighborhood. We both laughed because, in a strange way, that fake well had become a symbol of everything we fought for: freedom, fairness, and the courage to say enough when bullies pushed too far. But just when I thought it was all over, a letter arrived in my mailbox the next day, and this one, it was handwritten in shaky cursive. From Karen. The envelope was plain, no return address. Just my name, written in shaky cursive, barely legible, almost hesitant. I stared at it for a while before opening it, unsure of what to expect. A threat? A plea? Another attempt at control? Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, no clipboard, no citations, just a letter. Jacob, you think you understand everything that happened. You do not. I never wanted to be the HOA president. I just took the role because someone had to. I watched this neighborhood fall apart, trash on lawns, parties until midnight, pets running loose. I tried to fix it, but I let it become personal. I let the power make me feel important. Maybe because I had nothing else. When my husband died, the only thing that kept me going was control. This place was my last grip on something steady. I thought if I enforced the rules, the order, the neatness maybe, I could hold the rest of my life together. I was wrong. What? I did 2 filing complaints, calling 911. The lawsuit heat was over the line. I know that. I know I hurt people. I do not expect forgiveness. But I hope that one day you understand that I was never trying to destroy anyone. I was just afraid. And I let that fear make me someone I do not recognize anymore. Karen Holloway. I read it twice. Then a third time, it was like hearing a whisper from a different version of Hertha, one buried under layers of control, fear, and defensiveness. The one nobody in Pine Ridge had seen. I folded the letter and slipped it into my desk drawer, not out of spite, but because, deep down, I knew it mattered. Her words might not excuse what she had done, but they explained a lot. And they reminded me that even the worst people in our lives are still broken in ways we cannot always see. Later that week, the new HOA board held its first official meeting. No clipboards, no shouting. Just a circle of folding. Chairs in Mrs. Ellis's backyard. Surrounded by citronella candles and pitcher. After pitcher of sweet tea, we laid out new goals. Drop all unfair citations from the past year. Reinvest community fees into a shared garden and walking path. Create a real emergency response plan. Not one that involved yelling at 911 operators. And, most importantly, host monthly gatherings. So nobody ever felt like a stranger again. Was small. But it was a start as secretary. I began keeping digital records of everything. Transparent, shareable, fair. And it felt good. Like we had turned something rotten into something worth growing. But I could not stop thinking about Karen's letter. Few days later, I walked to her house. Her SUV was gone. Her mailbox overflowed with unopened flyers. Curtains were drawn. It was like the home itself had stopped breathing. Mrs. Ellis walked up beside me. She left, she said gently. Packed up 2 days ago. Sold the house to a young couple from out of town. Quiet folks, seemed sweet. I nodded slowly. Do you think she really meant the letter? She gave me a sad smile. I think she did. I think she realized too late what she had become. Sometimes, that's the hardest truth of all. We stood there in silence for a while. I never got to say anything to Karen. No closure. No confrontation. Just a note, an empty house, and a neighborhood trying to heal. But maybe that was enough, because Pine Ridge was different now. Neighbors smiled more. Kids chalked colorful drawings on the sidewalks. One man started a Saturday morning coffee cart. At the corner of the cul-de-sac, even the mailman lingered a little longer these days, chatting instead of just dropping envelopes. And the barrel. Still there, still collecting rainwater. But now, someone had painted it bright blue with a hand-lettered sign that read, "The well that started it all." It had become a symbol, not of conflict, but of change. Of what happens when good people stop being silent. When one person stands up, others find the courage to rise too. And in that way, even Karen became part of the neighborhood's healing. Her chaos led to our clarity. Her fear forced us to choose unity. And as the days passed, I realized something simple but powerful. She may have tried to destroy this place, but in the end, she helped us build it stronger than it had ever been. 3 months passed since Karen left Pine Ridge. In that time, The neighborhood transformed not because someone fixed everything overnight, but because everyone pitched in one little piece at a time. What began with chaos turned into cooperation. What started as resistance turned into restoration. And it was beautiful. Our newly formed HOA board met twice a month under the tall oak in Mrs. Ellis's backyard. No fancy conference tables, just mismatched chairs, clipboards replaced by clip-on smiles. We had budget discussions, maintenance planning, even a committee to design a dog park near the creek. The community garden bloomed literally. Tomatoes, squash, peppers, sunflowers. And every time someone plucked a ripe fruit or brought a basket of fresh veggies to a neighbor's doorstep, they would say it with a grin, courtesy of the HOA. Who would have thought those 3 letters, once whispered like a threat, could become a symbol of growth? But the truth is, that change did not come from structure. It came from people. It came from Mrs. Ellis baking muffins for every new homeowner. It came from the teenagers volunteering to repaint the benches at the bus stop. It came from the retired couple down the road who donated a picnic table just so we could all eat together once a month. And yes, it even came from Karen. Though she would probably never believe it, because without her chaos, we never would have woken up. She was the fire alarm, the storm that cleared the air. And the strange thing is, we all started to admit that at the Fall Harvest Festival, which we hosted right on my field where it all began, someone suggested naming the corn maze after her. The Holloway maze, they joked. You go in thinking you know the rules, and come out exhausted but better for it. Everyone laughed. Even I did. But deep down, I realized something else had happened, something more important than elections. Citations or lawsuits. We had started to forgive her, not because we forgot, but because we grew. I kept her letter. I read it now and then, not to dwell on the past, but to remind myself that even people who do the worst things might just be doing the best they can with the broken tools they've been given. And maybe, just maybe, all they need is a little mercy. One afternoon, months later, as I was planting lavender along the side of the house, a car I did not recognize rolled up slowly. It stopped in front of Karen's old place. A woman stepped out, maybe mid-30s, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. She looked around, then approached me with a cautious smile. "Hi, I'm Paige. We just bought this place. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all," I said warmly. "Welcome to Pine Ridge." She looked around. "It's quiet." I smiled. "That's a good sign here." She hesitated, then said, "I heard some things from the realtor about the last owner." I chuckled. "Hear stories. Some wild, some exaggerated." She tilted her head. "Was it really that bad?" I paused, then said honestly, "At the time, yeah, but it led to good things." Sometimes storms clear out more than just trees, they clear the air. She nodded, looking at her new home. "Well, I hope we can be part of the good." "You already are," I said, offering her a small potted plant. "Lavender? We give one to every new neighbor now. It's just our way of saying, you're not alone here." She took it with a tearful smile. "Thank you." And as she walked back toward her porch, plant in hand, I looked around and took a deep breath. Pine Ridge had been through a lot. A fake well, a real lawsuit, a neighborhood divided by fear. But we came through it together, stronger, kinder, braver. And I realized then that the real story was never about Karen. It was about the people who decided not to be victims of circumstance, but creators of community, about the people who stopped hiding and started showing up, about rain barrels and porch meetings and neighbors who said, "No more." And in the end, we did not just win, we healed, because sometimes the most unexpected battles are the ones that teach you how much you actually care about what you have and how far you're willing to go to protect it.